Hello and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, I am Disco Kitty the Crappy Crafter. Today we're going to play with this air dry clay. I don't know if you remember last week I took it out for a whole 2 seconds to say I wasn't going to use it last week. I was going to be using that homemade air dry clay and air dry clay that is actually made from clay as opposed to whatever this stuff is made out of. I have no idea what it is. People tell me it's not polymer clay, but I don't know how it's not a polymer based thing because it feels very plasticky. It feels like plastic. It does. The stuff that we used last week, that was real clay, or the stuff that I had made at home, which was, what was it, baking soda and cornstarch and water. But yeah, so this time we're going to just do a couple of really simple things. I bought this big bag because I wanted to see if I could dye it, and because I always need a lot of white more than anything else. I'm going to pick up a bag of black at some point too, because I imagine it's going to be very, very, very hard to make this white, which is the whitest white of all of the clays that I have. It would be very hard to make that a dark color. But yeah, so we're going to try dyeing it with alcohol or resin pigments, acrylic paint, and pigment powders. So let's just get right into it. Alright, so let's see what we're working with. We are working with what they call air dry clay, and it is the foam kind of air dry clay, and I love that they double bag it. I love it. And did you see that? Did you see that? How stringy and wonderful it is when it's nice and fresh. Oh, it's so stringy and wonderful when it's nice and fresh. It is already starting to dry out a little bit though, making me sad. So when I was done with this, I put a damp paper towel in the outer bag with it. Not so that it was actually touching it, but just so that, it doesn't lose any more of its own moisture. If it loses moisture, maybe it'll be just the stuff off the paper towel. I don't know. We'll see how it works. I haven't used this stuff a lot. I'm definitely going to use a lot more of it as we keep going though, because I love it. I love the way it feels. I just love it. It's so much fun. And yes, I did keep a damp paper towel over a bowl where I was storing my excess. That way it wouldn't dry out while I was waiting for it. And I got some finger cots. These finger cots I've actually had since the beginning of the pandemic. I had originally gotten them partially for me and partially for the store that I work at. And, so that people could use the credit card machine without touching the credit card machine that everybody else touched. So the first thing that we did is we used some alcohol inks, Morandi pigment inks. I talked about those a little bit last week. I'm not entirely sure what they're really made of. It could be alcohol, no idea. But this is definitely acrylic paint. And then after the acrylic paint, we're going to use some mica powders. And every one of these that I make is going to be a little bit darker. So I don't do a good job in trying to even out the colors. But it all depends on what you want. If you want a real good solid color, you're gonna want to use the acrylic paints. If you want a nice pastel-y color, you can get a pastel color out of the pigment, out of the paint as well. If you want something that's a little bit more pastel-y, use the alcohol inks. If you want something that has a shimmer, just a bit of a shimmer, use the mica powder, because the mica powder will make it ever so slightly shimmery. Just a little bit. You'll be able to, you can't see it really good with the grays because I don't think I used enough, but you'll be able to see it with the brown and the green that I use later. And of course the brown pigment powder was shedding on everything. I don't know if the gray and the green did as well and I just didn't notice it, but I'll notice the brown. So I have decided that I'm actually going to make these into something I decided to make them into little gray pumpkins. Why gray pumpkins? Well, because I dyed them gray, and then I decided to make them pumpkins afterwards. And this was like a little hallelujah moment for me, going, hey, wait, pumpkins aren't like flat on the top and the bottom. They have divots. Sometimes, right? I don't know. I think they look better this way. What do you think? As I say every time, let me know what you would have done different. How would you have done this? How would you have colored these? Have you colored this kind of clay before? What do you use? Let me know in the comments. Let's have a discussion. I just think it's an awful lot of fun. I mean, playing with clay is just an awful lot of fun. And playing with the air dry clay and the polymer clays, I like because they're just not quite as messy as clay. It just gets everywhere. It gets in your clothes, it gets all over your hands, it just, yeah. See, now I'm gonna try again with the finger cuts, but eventually I'm just gonna be like, I can't deal with this. Get rid of them. I can't deal with it. I'll deal with the paint underneath my fingernails. Ugh. Blech. The brown paint was under my fingernails until the next day, though. Blech. Oh, lordy. But yeah, so alcohol inks, acrylic paints, and pigment powders are what we use today to try to make colorful, pretty things. And this next one's not gonna work so well. Yeah, I missed that good. Oh, I missed that so good. Oh, that was awful. But that's okay. Mistakes happen. Everybody makes mistakes. You can't not make mistakes. Nobody is perfect. Now, I'm trying to make sure that they aren't drying out too fast because these pieces are really small. And I'm also dipping the ends of them into a little bit of water. You know, activate it a little, make it, you know, glue itself together, as it were. It actually works pretty well. I was surprised. They certainly stayed together better than the air dry clays that I worked with last week. The clay, I didn't stick together very well, and that just all fell apart. That tray with those two little flower swirly things, yeah, one of them just fell right off. Today, even. It was kind of funny. I was moving them so that I could get my computer so that I could do this voiceover, and it all just went, and I went, really? Oh, okay. Well, you know, whatever. See, now this time, I remembered to take a little tiny bit of brown off to make a little itty bitty tiny vine. We'll stick it in the water, and we're going to stick it in there, and then I'm going to twist it between my fingers. I'm curling it, I'm twisting it with my fingers so that it curls on its own, and it worked really, really well. Make a little leaf. Stick it right in there. And working on the last one. We're almost done. Almost there. But yeah, see, that was me showing the camera for whatever reason, because you can't see it because I have it going at like ×8. That it had left some brown on my finger, and I was like, oh, the nerve. Oh my gosh. But yeah, there they are. All done. All nice and pretty. They worked very well. That's the alcohol inks. And the paint. Acrylic paint. And mica powders. Yay! Well, those actually all worked pretty well. So here's the pigment ink. The green was definitely an alcohol ink. The brown and the black were Morandi pigments, which are, I don't know, darker, more opaque, definitely a more opaque, you know, ink. But look at that. I mean, I think it worked pretty darn well. And then this next one, this was the paint, and I used an acrylic paint from Meeden. meeting, you know. So this is how that went. And they were all, you know, paints. They were all the same style paints because they were all from the same brand. And these are the pigment powders. And if you look real close, I don't know if you can see it, but the pigment powders leave, if you use enough of the pigment powders like I did with the brown and the green, it leaves a bit of a shine behind. Can you see that? Is that shimmering? I can't tell. I can't tell. But I think that amongst the three of them, I probably won't do alcohol inks again because it's just messy, and you know, it's alcohol, it's a liquid, it makes your clay softer and softer and softer until it gets to the point where it's just plain sticky, and then that's just gross. The paint, I found that the paint was drying on my fingers before it was getting into the clay, and that was making it just kind of weird, but it worked really well. So I'll do the paint thing again with gloves because the finger cuts just weren't cutting it. And the last one, the one with the pigment powders, I think actually worked the best. I think it really did. It was messy because pigment powders are very, very, very fine. Mica powders. They're mica powders. And they're super fine. And they fluff really easily. So you have to be really, really careful and gentle when you're mixing it in and when you're kneading it in, or it's just gonna fluff everywhere. Or like you saw, I completely missed the leaf. Was it the leaf? I don't remember. I completely missed something with the powder, and it just ended up next to it. I think it was the brown. I don't remember. But you like that? I think they worked really, really well. What do you think? What would you use to... Where did I put it? Yeah. What would you use to make air dry clay colorful? To pigment the clay? What kind of pigments would you use to pigment the clay? So like I said, alcohol inks. You're gonna have to use, if they're not a really, try that again. If they're not very, very opaque alcohol inks, you're gonna need a lot of it, and I think it's just gonna ruin your clay. Unless you're looking for a nice light pastel, then they'll be great for pastels. And then the paint worked really, really well. Yay! Except it was messy. And then the pigment powders, mica powders, also very, very floofy messy, but they worked really, really well. And I'll probably do all three, honestly. If I need something that is very pastel, I'll probably go with the alcohol inks. Although if I'm gonna do any projects bigger than this, I'll probably, I don't even know, because yeah, anything bigger than that is just gonna, I don't know, we'll see. But the only thing about this was the mica powders, is if you noticed when I was, you know, rolling it out on the silicone, the brown, the stem, and the little the vine left powder behind on the silicone. I don't know if that's just because I was using a silicone mat and powder likes to stick to it anyways, or if it was because it's shedding. But either way, keep it in mind, anything you're going to use to dye or pigment air dry clay is probably going to be messy. But that's okay, because art is messy. Crafting is messy. And if you want to craft, you're gonna get messy, which is something that I personally hate. I can't stand being messy. I don't care if my room is messy. I personally can't with the hands. My hands have to be clean. Anyways, so I think that's pretty much it for this week. Thank you so much for visiting, and I'll see you next week. Stay safe.